Amara Bennett stood outside the banquet hall, rain soaking through her bright red coat, mascara streaking down her brown cheeks as she stared at her phone screen. Through the glass doors behind her, she could see her younger sister Kenji laughing with their parents, showing off the engagement ring that caught every light in the room. Inside, music played, champagne flowed, and everyone celebrated love. Everyone except Amara. Her hands shook as she scrolled through her contacts, stopping at one name. The only person who might understand. The only person who had never judged her, never made her feel small, never looked at her with pity in his eyes. Julian Crawford. Her best friend since their sophomore year at Howard University. The brilliant, kind man who had built a tech empire from his dorm room and still remembered to text her every Sunday morning to ask how her week was going. The man who was probably at some charity gala right now, surrounded by sophisticated people in a world so different from this small-town engagement party. She pressed call before she could change her mind. He answered on the second ring. Amara? Are you okay? The concern in his voice broke something inside her. Julian, I need to ask you something, and it's going to sound completely insane. Tell me. No hesitation. No judgment. Just those two words that meant he was listening. Tyler is here. Her voice cracked on her ex-boyfriend's name. At Kenji's engagement party. With his new fiancée. They got engaged 3 months after we broke up. 3 months, Julian. And everyone keeps looking at me like I'm this sad, pathetic woman who can't keep a man. My aunt literally asked me if I'd considered online dating. My mother keeps patting my hand and telling me my time will come. And Kenji's fiancée's sister just told me she knows a great therapist who specializes in helping women process romantic failure. She heard Julian moving, probably leaving whatever event he was attending. Where are you right now? Outside the hall. I can't go back in there. But it gets worse. She laughed, a bitter sound that hurt her throat. Next month is the Maplewood reunion. 10th year since high school graduation. I already RSVP'd yes before Tyler announced he'd be there with his fiancée. Everyone from our class will be there, and they'll all see that I'm still alone while Tyler has moved on. While everyone has moved on. I run a successful marketing division, Julian. I've worked so hard. But all anyone back home cares about is whether I have a ring on my finger. Amara. His voice was steady, grounding. What do you need? This was the moment. The insane request she had been building up to. I need you to come home with me. To Maplewood. To the reunion. And I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend. Silence stretched between them. Amara closed her eyes, waiting for the gentle rejection, the reasonable explanation of why this was a bad idea. When do we leave? Julian asked. What? When do we leave? What dates? I'll clear my schedule. Julian, you can't just clear your schedule. You have board meetings and investor calls and probably 100 things that are more important than my small-town drama. Nothing is more important than you. He said it so simply, so completely, that Amara felt tears spring to her eyes again. Send me the dates. I'll handle everything. And Amara? We're not pretending I'm your boyfriend. We're showing everyone the truth, that you're brilliant and successful and loved. They just won't know that the loved part is by your best friend instead of a romantic partner. Now go back inside, hold your head high, and know that you're not facing any of this alone. Amara wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara further. Why are you so good to me? Because you're worth it. Always have been. Now go celebrate your sister's happiness. I'll see you soon. The call ended, and Amara stood in the rain for another moment, letting his words sink in. Julian was coming. Julian would be by her side. Somehow, that made everything feel manageable. She straightened her shoulders, smoothed down her red coat, and walked back into the banquet hall. Tyler was talking with a group near the bar, his fiancée's hand possessively on his arm. He looked up as Amara entered and she saw the flash of pity in his eyes. But Amara just smiled. A real smile this time. Because in a few weeks she'd return to this town with Julian Crawford at her side, and no one, especially not Tyler Morrison, would ever look at her with pity again. Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of people who should know you best? Have you ever needed someone so desperately that asking for help felt like admitting defeat? If Amara's story resonates with you, subscribe to follow her journey and comment below. Have you ever made a request that changed everything? The party continued around her. Her mother caught her eye from across the room and gestured for Amara to join them at the family table. Amara walked over, feeling lighter than she had all evening. There you are, sweetheart, her mother said, patting the chair beside her. We were worried about you. I'm fine, Mama. Just needed some air. Her sister Kenji leaned forward, her engagement ring catching the light. Are you sure you're okay? I know having Tyler here must be hard. Amara looked at her baby sister, at the genuine concern in her eyes, and felt a wave of love. Kenji hadn't invited Tyler to hurt her. The engagement party was just small enough that everyone from their social circle got invited, and Tyler had been part of that circle for years. I'm really okay, Amara said and meant it. Actually, I have good news. I'm bringing someone to the reunion next month. Julian. My friend from college. Her mother's eyes lit up. Julian? The one who started that computer company? Tech company, Mama. And yes, that Julian. Oh honey, that's wonderful. I can't wait to meet him properly. You've talked about him for years. Her mother paused, studying Amara's face. Is he just a friend or is there something more there? Amara felt her cheeks warm. The lie was necessary, she told herself. Just for a little while. Just to get through the reunion without everyone's pity. There's something more. We're together. Kenji squealed and clapped her hands. Finally. You two have been dancing around each other since college. I'm so happy for you. The guilt twisted in Amara's stomach, but she pushed it down. This was temporary. A favor between friends. After the reunion, she and Julian would quietly break up, and she'd tell everyone they decided they were better as friends. No harm done. Tell us about him, her Aunt Diane said, leaning in with eager interest. What's he like? What was Julian like? Amara could answer that honestly, at least. He's kind. Genuinely kind, not just polite. He remembers small things like how I take my coffee or that I love old bookstores. He's brilliant but never makes anyone feel stupid. He listens more than he talks. And he has this way of making you feel like you're the most important person in the room, no matter where you are or what else is happening. Her mother reached over and squeezed her hand. He sounds perfect, baby. He is, Amara said softly. And that was the truth. Julian was perfect. As a friend. As a person. And for the next few weeks, he'd be perfect as her pretend boyfriend too. Across the room, Tyler was staring at her again. But this time, Amara didn't look away. She held his gaze steadily, confidently, until he was the one who turned away first. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations for Kenji and questions about Julian. Amara fielded them all with growing confidence, describing her best friend to her family and watching their excitement build. By the time she said goodnight and headed to her hotel room, she was exhausted but no longer desperate. In her room, she found 3 text messages from Julian. The first, just booked my flights. Arriving 3 days before the reunion so we have time to prepare. The second, also booked us a suite at that boutique hotel you mentioned loving in your hometown. The one with the garden. The third, get some sleep. Everything is going to be fine. Better than fine. I promise. Amara sat on the edge of her bed, staring at those messages. Julian had spent the last few hours handling everything while she was at the party. He hadn't just agreed to help. He had immediately taken action, clearing his schedule, making arrangements, ensuring she wouldn't have to worry about any details. She typed back, "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." His response came immediately, "Good thing you'll never have to find out. Good night, Amara. Sweet dreams." Amara fell asleep that night with her phone clutched in her hand, Julian's messages still glowing on the screen, and for the first time in months she felt hopeful about the future. 3 weeks later, Amara stood in Julian's downtown office, watching the city spread out below them through floor-to-ceiling windows. The view from the 45th floor was stunning, all glass and steel and possibility. She'd been here countless times over the years, but today felt different. Today they were planning a deception. "Stop pacing," Julian said from behind his desk. He was wearing a navy blue suit that fit him perfectly, his dark brown hair slightly messy from running his hands through it during their earlier video conference with his Tokyo investors. "You're making me nervous." "I'm making you nervous? Julian, do you understand what we're about to do? We're going to lie to my entire hometown. To my family. To people I've known my whole life." Julian stood and walked around his desk, stopping directly in front of her. At 6 feet 2 inches, he had to look down to meet her eyes, and Amara had always loved that about him. He never made her feel small despite their height difference. "We're helping you through a difficult situation," he said gently. "Your hometown will see you happy and successful with someone who cares about you. All of that is true. The only thing we're adjusting is the label on our relationship." "Adjusting the label?" Amara repeated. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple." Julian gestured to the leather couches by the window. "Come sit. We need to plan this properly." Amara followed him, sinking into the soft leather. Julian sat beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same cedar and bergamot scent he'd worn since college. First things first, Julian said, pulling out his tablet. We need a story. How did we get together? When? What changed? What changed? Amara murmured. That's a good question. We've been friends for 8 years, Julian. Why would we suddenly become something more? Maybe it wasn't sudden. Julian's voice was thoughtful. Maybe we've been dancing around it for years and something finally pushed us to acknowledge what was always there. Amara looked at him sharply. That's very convincing. He smiled, but something in his eyes made her heart skip. It needs to be. So let's say we got together 3 months ago. Right around the holidays. You came to my family's Christmas party, remember? We can say that's when things shifted. Amara did remember. Julian's mother had pulled her aside that night and asked, with too much hope in her voice, whether there was anything romantic between her and Julian. Amara had laughed it off, but Mrs. Crawford had looked disappointed. Okay, Amara agreed. 3 months. That's believable. What about our first date? The Italian place on 5th Avenue. I took you there for your birthday last year, and you said it was the most romantic restaurant you'd ever been to. I did say that. Amara felt warmth spread through her chest. Julian remembered the smallest details. What else do we need to cover? Julian pulled up a document on his tablet. I made a list. Physical affection levels we're comfortable with. Pet names, if any. How we handle questions about our future together. Exit strategy for after the reunion. Amara stared at the detailed outline. You made a list. I make lists for everything. You know that. But he looked almost sheepish. Too much. No, Amara said softly. It's perfect. Very you. They spent the next hour going through every scenario. Julian suggested they keep physical affection natural, hand-holding and casual touches that would read as genuine. No forced kisses or overdone displays. As for pet names, Amara said she'd probably just call him Jules like she always did, and Julian agreed that sounded authentic. What about sleeping arrangements? Julian asked, his tone carefully neutral. The boutique hotel only had 1 suite available. I booked it because you mentioned loving that place, but I can get a second room at another hotel if you'd prefer. No, it's fine, Amara said quickly. Too quickly, maybe. I mean, we're adults. We can share a suite. There's probably a couch. There's a couch, Julian confirmed. I'll sleep there. We can figure it out when we get there. Amara stood, suddenly needing to move. Julian, are you sure about this? Your company is about to launch that new software platform. You have that keynote speech at the tech conference. This is taking you away from important things. Julian stood too, closing the distance between them in 2 steps. He took her hands, his grip warm and steady. Amara, look at me. She did, meeting his dark brown eyes. You are important. You're one of the most important people in my life, and you have been since we met in that campus library 8 years ago when you told me my coding was impressive but my coffee order was an abomination. Amara laughed despite herself. 12 sugars, Julian. Who puts 12 sugars in coffee? Someone who was running on 2 hours of sleep and desperately needed energy. He smiled, then grew serious again. The point is, you've been there for me through everything. When I was starting my company and terrified I'd fail. When my father was sick. When that business deal fell through and I thought I'd lose everything. You never hesitated to show up for me. So please don't question whether I'll show up for you now. It's not the same thing, Amara protested weakly. It's exactly the same thing. It's friendship. It's love. Not romantic love, he added quickly, but the kind of love that matters just as much. The kind that says I value you, I support you, and I'll be there when you need me. Amara felt tears threatening again. She'd been so emotional lately, ever since Kenji's engagement party. What did I do to deserve you? You were yourself. That's always been enough. Julian released her hands and walked to his desk, pulling out a folder. Now, I have something for you. Julian, no. You've already done too much. Just look. She took the folder and opened it. Inside were plane tickets, hotel confirmations, and a detailed itinerary. But there was also something else, a credit card with her name on it. What is this? It's for any expenses during our trip. Shopping, meals, activities. Whatever you need. Absolutely not. Amara tried to hand it back. Julian, I can pay for my own things. I know you can. But we're supposed to be a couple and I'd spoil my girlfriend. So take it. Please. This is too much. It's not enough. Julian's voice was firm. Amara, let me do this. Let me help you. You spend so much time being strong and independent and proving you don't need anyone. And you don't. But that doesn't mean you can't accept help when it's offered with love. The word love hung in the air between them. Amara clutched the folder, feeling the weight of Julian's generosity, his kindness, his unwavering support. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Good." Julian smiled, that warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Now we leave in 2 days. I've arranged for a car to pick you up at 7 in the morning. We'll fly to Atlanta, then drive to Maplewood. Should arrive by early afternoon. You've thought of everything. That's my job. Well, one of them. The other job is being the best fake boyfriend you've ever had." Amara laughed. "You'll be my only fake boyfriend. Even better. No competition." As Amara left his office that evening, folder tucked under her arm, she felt a strange mix of gratitude and guilt. Julian was doing all of this for her, asking nothing in return. He dropped everything, rearranged his schedule, and was about to spend days pretending to be in love with her. The guilt twisted harder. Because the truth was, pretending to be in love with Julian Crawford wouldn't be difficult at all. The difficult part would be remembering it was all pretend. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Julian's hands holding hers, his voice saying, "It's friendship. It's love." She thought about the way he looked at her sometimes, with such warmth and affection that it made her chest ache. They'd been friends for 8 years. Best friends. The kind of friends who knew each other's coffee orders and middle names and deepest fears. The kind of friends who showed up always no matter what. But they'd never been more than friends. They'd never even come close. Julian dated occasionally sophisticated women from his business world who wore designer clothes and talked about investment portfolios. Amara dated too, though less successfully, men who seemed intimidated by her career or bored by her interests. She'd never let herself wonder what it would be like to date Julian. To really date him, not as a pretense but as a real possibility. That way lay danger. Losing Julian as a friend would destroy her, and she'd never risk their friendship for something as uncertain as romance. So why did her heart race when she thought about the next few days? Why did the idea of holding his hand, of letting him touch her back or lean close to whisper in her ear, make her skin feel too warm? It's just nerves, she told herself. Just the stress of the situation. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, her last thought was of Julian's voice saying, "You were yourself. That's always been enough." And deep in her heart, in a place she didn't want to examine too closely, she wondered what it would mean if they crossed that line between friendship and something more. The private jet touched down at a small regional airport 40 minutes from Maplewood. Amara had flown commercial her entire life, crammed into middle seats with crying babies and recycled air. This was different. This was leather seats that reclined all the way back, fresh fruit and pastries whenever she wanted them, and windows so large she could watch the clouds drift by like lazy dreams. "I could get used to this," she admitted, gathering her things as they taxied to a stop. Julian grinned from across the aisle. "Just wait until you see the car." The car turned out to be a sleek black SUV with a driver named Thomas who greeted them warmly and loaded their luggage without being asked. The interior smelled like new leather and expensive cologne, and as they pulled away from the airport, Amara watched the familiar landscape of rural Georgia roll past the tinted windows. "Nervous?" Julian asked, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Terrified," Amara admitted. "We haven't even arrived yet, and I'm already wondering if we can pull this off." "We can." Julian's voice was confident. "Remember, we're not lying about the important things. We're best friends who care about each other deeply. We're just adding a romantic label to something that's already real." Amara wanted to point out that the romantic part was actually the most important thing, the entire deception they were building. But Julian's hand was warm around hers, his thumb drawing small circles on her palm, and she couldn't quite form the words. The drive to Maplewood took 50 minutes, highways giving way to two-lane roads lined with pine trees and kudzu. They passed through small towns with names like Pineville and Harmony Springs, places where the biggest excitement was Friday night football and the county fair. Finally they reached Maplewood. Population 8,000, according to the faded sign at the town limits. The main street looked exactly as Amara remembered. Brick storefronts, a diner with red vinyl booths visible through the windows, a hardware store that had been run by the same family for 3 generations. "It's charming," Julian said, looking out the window with genuine interest. "You grew up here?" "Born and raised. That's my elementary school." Amara pointed to a low brick building. "And that's the library where I spent every Saturday. And that church is where Kenji's getting married next month." Thomas drove them through town to the boutique hotel on the outskirts. The Magnolia Inn was painted pale yellow with white trim, surrounded by gardens that would be spectacular in another month when everything bloomed. Right now, in early spring, green shoots were just beginning to push through the soil. "It's beautiful," Julian said as Thomas pulled up to the front entrance. "My parents brought me here once for Mother's Day brunch when I was 12, Amara said. "I thought it was the fanciest place in the world." They checked in at the front desk, where a woman with kind eyes and silver hair handed them an old-fashioned brass key. "Room 7, top floor. It's our best suite. Mr. Crawford, your assistant called ahead with special requests. Everything has been arranged." "Special requests?" Amara asked as they climbed the stairs. Julian smiled mysteriously. "You'll see." The suite was gorgeous. Hardwood floors, antique furniture, and windows overlooking the gardens. But what made Amara gasp was the vase of red roses on the table, the box of chocolate truffles from her favorite chocolatier in Atlanta, and the bottle of wine with a note in Julian's handwriting, "To new beginnings and old friends." "Julian," Amara breathed. "This is too much." "It's what a boyfriend would do." He set down his suitcase, looking around the room. "There's the couch I mentioned. Looks comfortable enough." Amara studied the couch. It was beautiful, upholstered in sage green velvet, but it was maybe 5 feet long. Julian would have to sleep curled up or with his legs hanging off the edge. "You can't sleep there. You'll wake up with your back in knots." "I'll be fine." "Julian." Amara walked to the bedroom door and looked inside. The bed was enormous, a 4-poster king covered in white linens and about a dozen decorative pillows. "The bed is huge. We're both adults. We can share." "Are you sure?" "Positive. We've slept in the same room before." That had been during their senior year spring break when a group of them rented a beach house and room assignments got confused. Amara and Julian had ended up sharing a room with twin beds, and it had been completely fine. Comfortable even. "Okay," Julian agreed. "But I'm taking the left side. I always sleep on the left." "Fine by me. I'm a right-side sleeper anyway." They unpacked, hanging clothes in the wardrobe and claiming bathroom counter space. It felt domestic and easy, this casual intimacy of sharing space with someone who knew your habits. Julian left the bathroom door open while brushing his teeth, and Amara didn't think twice about walking in to grab her face wash. "Your parents invited us to dinner tonight," Julian said, reading a text on his phone. 6 o'clock at their house. Amara's stomach flipped. "Tonight? Already?" "They're excited to meet your boyfriend." Julian said the word with a slight smile. "I'm excited to meet them properly too. I've only talked to your mother on the phone a few times over the years." "They're going to love you," Amara said, and meant it. Everyone loved Julian. He had this way of making people feel heard, feel valued. It was part of what made him such a successful businessman, but it was also just who he was as a person. They spent the afternoon exploring the town. Julian wanted to see where Amara grew up, so she took him to her childhood home, a modest 2-story house with blue siding and a porch swing. Her parents had moved to a smaller place closer to town a few years ago, but the memories remained. "I had my first kiss on that porch," Amara said, pointing to the spot. "How old were you?" 14. "Bobby Patterson. Braces and everything. It was terrible." Julian laughed. "My first kiss was in a science lab. I knocked over a beaker trying to lean in." "Smooth. I've improved since then. I hope." There was something in his voice that made Amara look at him sharply, but his expression was neutral, focused on the house. They walked through downtown, stopping in the bookstore where Amara used to spend her allowance. The owner, Mrs. Chen, recognized her immediately and pulled her into a hug. "Amara Bennett. Look at you, all grown up and beautiful. And who is this handsome man?" "This is Julian. My boyfriend." The word felt strange in her mouth, but Mrs. Chen beamed. "Boyfriend? It's about time. You were always too focused on your books to notice the boys chasing after you in high school." "Boys were not chasing after me," Amara protested. "Oh honey, you were oblivious. Half the football team had crushes on you." Mrs. Chen turned to Julian. "She was brilliant. Top of her class. We all knew she'd do something special." Julian slipped his arm around Amara's waist, the touch feeling natural even though they'd never stood like this before. "She still is. Brilliant and special both." Amara felt heat rise in her cheeks. The way Julian looked at her when he said those words, the warmth in his voice, it would convince anyone they were in love. They bought a few books, Julian insisting on paying despite Amara's protests. As they left the store, his arms stayed around her waist, and Amara found herself leaning into him slightly. "You're good at this," she murmured. "At what?" "The boyfriend thing. The touching and the compliments. It feels real." Julian was quiet for a moment. Maybe that's because the foundation is real. I do think you're brilliant. I do think you're special. Those aren't lies, Amara. At 6 o'clock they arrived at her parents' house. The moment Amara's mother opened the door, she was pulled into a tight hug. There's my baby girl. And this must be Julian. Her mother stepped back, studying Julian with the assessing gaze only mothers possess. My goodness, you're tall. And handsome. Amara didn't mention handsome. Mama, Amara groaned. I'm just stating facts. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready. The house smelled like Amara's childhood. Collard greens and cornbread and her mother's famous fried chicken. Her father stood in the living room, wearing his favorite green cardigan, and extended his hand to Julian. Marcus Bennett. Good to finally meet you, son. Amara's talked about you for years. All good things, I hope, Julian said, shaking his hand. Mostly. Her father's eyes twinkled. She mentioned you put 12 sugars in your coffee. That concerns me. I've reduced it to 6, Julian said solemnly. Under Amara's supervision. Her father laughed, and just like that, Julian was in. They sat down to dinner, and Amara watched Julian charm her parents effortlessly. He asked about her father's work as a high school math teacher, listened intently to her mother's stories about the church choir, and complimented every dish with genuine enthusiasm. So how did you two finally get together? Her mother asked, passing the green beans. Amara mentioned it happened around Christmas. Julian reached under the table and found Amara's hand, threading their fingers together. It was at my family's Christmas party. Amara was wearing this deep red dress and she was laughing at something my cousin said. And I just looked at her and thought, how have I been this blind for 8 years? Amara stared at him. They discussed the story, but Julian had added details they hadn't planned. The red dress was real. She had worn that to his family's party. But the way he described looking at her, the way his voice softened, that was all Julian. I told her that night, Julian continued. Couldn't wait another minute. I said, Amara, I've been in love with you for longer than I want to admit, and I need to know if there's any chance you feel the same way. And what did you say? Her mother asked Amara. Amara's mouth was dry. She squeezed Julian's hand, trying to find her voice. I said yes. I said I'd been feeling the same way but was too afraid to risk our friendship. Love is always a risk, her father said quietly. But the best things in life usually are. They finished dinner and moved to the living room for coffee and pie. Amara's mother showed Julian photo albums, pointing out embarrassing pictures of Amara from childhood. Julian studied each one with interest, laughing at her gap-toothed school photos and her ill-advised bangs phase in middle school. She was beautiful even then, Julian said softly. Still is, her father added. Inside and out. As the evening wound down, Amara's mother walked them to the door. She hugged Amara tightly, then pulled Julian down to kiss his cheek. You take care of my girl, she said. Always, Julian promised. In the car back to the hotel, Amara was quiet. Julian kept glancing at her, concerned. What's wrong? Did I overstep at dinner? No, you were perfect. Too perfect. Amara turned to look at him. Julian, the way you talked about us getting together, the details about the red dress and telling me you loved me. Where did that come from? Julian was silent for a moment, his jaw working. It made the story more believable. That's all. Right? Amara said slowly. Believable. But as they pulled up to the Magnolia Inn, as Julian came around to open her door like he always did, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. The line between pretend and real was starting to blur, and she wasn't sure if that thrilled her or terrified her. Maybe both. The next morning, Amara woke to sunlight streaming through the gauzy curtains and the smell of coffee. She sat up, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. The Magnolia Inn. Sharing a room with Julian. She looked at the other side of the bed. Empty, but the pillow still held the indent of his head. She'd been so nervous about sharing a bed with him, but it had been fine. Easy even. They'd both stuck to their sides, and Amara had fallen asleep to the sound of Julian's steady breathing. She found him on the small balcony outside their room, already dressed in dark jeans and a bright blue button-down, 2 coffee cups in front of him. Morning, he said, smiling at her. I ordered room service. Your coffee is the one with 3 creams and 2 sugars. Amara took the cup gratefully, settling into the chair beside him. The gardens below were beautiful in the morning light, birds singing in the magnolia trees. Sleep okay? Julian asked. Better than I expected. You? Same. That bed is incredibly comfortable. He paused. I didn't crowd you, did I? I tried to stay on my side. You were perfect. Amara sipped her coffee. What's the plan for today? Julian pulled out his phone, checking their itinerary. Your sister invited us to lunch at her place. She wants to go over some final wedding details and she's excited to meet me. Then tonight, there's that welcome dinner at the community center for reunion attendees. The dinner? Amara groaned. I forgot about that. Everyone will be there. All my old classmates, their spouses, probably half the town. Hey. Julian reached over and took her hand. We've got this. You're not alone. They spent the morning walking around town, stopping at the farmer's market in the square. Julian bought fresh flowers from a vendor who recognized Amara and teased her about finally bringing a boy home. He bought peaches from another stand, insisting they were the best he'd ever tasted. You're charming everyone, Amara observed as they walked. I'm just being myself. Your hometown is wonderful, Amara. I can see why you missed it. At noon, they drove to Kenji's apartment on the east side of town. Kenji lived in a converted warehouse with her fiancé, Omar Hassan, a graphic designer who worked remotely. The space was modern and bright, with exposed brick and hanging plants everywhere. Kenji threw her arms around Amara the moment they walked in. I'm so glad you're here. And Julian finally. I've heard so much about you. Omar shook Julian's hand warmly. Man, good to meet you. Amara talks about you constantly. They settled around the kitchen table, where Kenji had spread out wedding planning materials. Sample invitations, seating charts, menu options. Amara helped her sister sort through choices while Julian and Omar talked about design software and tech startups. So, Kenji said, lowering her voice as the men moved to the living room. How serious are you two? Amara's heart skipped. What do you mean? I mean you've been friends forever. Now you're together. Are we talking casual or forever? It's still new, Amara hedged. We're taking it one day at a time. Kenji studied her sister's face. You look happy. Happier than I've seen you in a long time. He's good to you? The best, Amara said honestly. He's been so supportive through everything. That's love, Kenji said simply. Not the grand gestures or the fancy words. It's showing up. Being there. Mama always said you can tell how someone really feels by their actions, not their promises. Amara thought about Julian clearing his entire schedule, flying across the country, pretending to be her boyfriend just because she asked. If actions spoke louder than words, what was Julian saying? Over lunch, Kenji dropped a bombshell. Omar's parents are flying in from Egypt next week for the wedding. And Julian, I know this is last minute, but would you be willing to say a few words at the reception? As Amara's partner, you're practically family now. Amara nearly choked on her water. Kenji, that's too much to ask. I'd be honored, Julian said smoothly. Thank you for including me. After lunch, as they drove back to the hotel, Amara turned to Julian. You don't have to speak at the wedding. That's beyond what I asked for. I want to. Julian kept his eyes on the road. Your sister is important to you, which makes her important to me. Besides, I'm good at public speaking. Comes with the job. Back in their room, they had 2 hours before the welcome dinner. Amara tried on 3 different dresses, suddenly caring far too much about how she looked. The green one, Julian said from the doorway. Definitely the green one. Amara looked down at the emerald dress. It was pretty, fitted at the waist with a flowing skirt. You think? I know. You look beautiful. The word hung in the air between them. Beautiful. He'd called her that before, but always casually, the way friends do. This felt different. Amara changed into the green dress and spent longer than usual on her makeup and hair. When she emerged from the bathroom, Julian was adjusting his tie in the mirror. He'd changed into gray slacks and a burgundy shirt that brought out the warmth in his brown skin. We look good, Amara said, studying their reflection together. We do. Julian offered his arm. Ready to face everyone? The community center was packed when they arrived. Long tables covered in white cloths, balloons in the school colors of blue and gold, and what seemed like hundreds of people all talking at once. The moment Amara walked in, heads turned. Is that Amara Bennett? Someone called out. Within seconds, she was surrounded by former classmates. Brittany Rodriguez, who had been head cheerleader. Daniel Park, who had been student council president. Rachel O'Connor, who had been Amara's lab partner in chemistry. And Tyler Morrison, standing by the punch bowl with his fiancée watching the commotion. Julian stayed at Amara's side as she made introductions, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. Everyone wanted to know about her job, her life in the city, and especially about Julian. Julian Crawford, Brittany repeated, her eyes wide. The Julian Crawford? From Crawford Technologies. That's me, Julian said modestly. I read about you in Forbes, Daniel said, extending his hand. That software platform you developed is revolutionary. Thank you. It's been a team effort. Don't be modest, Amara said, pride in her voice. Julian built something incredible. He's changed how businesses handle data security. Julian squeezed her hand, a silent thank you for the support. Tyler appeared then, his fiancée on his arm. She was pretty in a generic way, blonde and thin and wearing a dress that probably cost more than Amara's monthly rent. Amara, Tyler said. Good to see you. And this must be the boyfriend everyone's talking about. Julian Crawford. Julian shook Tyler's hand, his grip firm. And you are? Tyler Morrison. Amara and I dated a while back. I see. Julian's voice was cool, polite. Well, it's nice to meet anyone from Amara's past. Though I have to say, I'm much more interested in her present and future. Tyler's smile faltered slightly. His fiancée, sensing tension, pulled him toward the buffet table. Sorry, Amara murmured to Julian. That was awkward. That was perfect. Did you see his face? Julian grinned. Come on, let's get some food. I'm starving. They filled their plates and found seats at a table with some of Amara's former classmates. The conversation flowed easily, stories of high school mixed with updates on current lives. Julian fit in seamlessly, laughing at the right moments, asking thoughtful questions, making everyone feel comfortable. Speech. Someone called out. The class president should give a speech. Daniel stood reluctantly, tapping his glass for attention. He gave a short welcome speech, thanking everyone for coming and raising a toast to old friendships and new beginnings. Then Brittany stood. I want to say something too. Amara Bennett, I was so jealous of you in high school. You were smart and kind and you didn't even know how special you were. But look at you now. Successful, happy with a man who clearly adores you. You give the rest of us hope. Applause filled the room. Amara felt tears prick her eyes. She'd spent so much time feeling like a failure for being single, for not having the picture-perfect life. But these people, her peers, they saw her success. They celebrated it. Julian leaned close, his lips nearly brushing her ear. See? You've always been enough, Amara. You just needed to see yourself through their eyes. The evening continued with music and dancing. Julian pulled Amara onto the dance floor for a slow song, one hand on her waist, the other holding hers. They moved together easily, naturally, like they'd been dancing together for years. Thank you, Amara said softly. For all of this. For being here. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Amara looked up at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. This was supposed to be pretend. A favor for a friend. But the way Julian held her, the way he looked at her, it felt terrifyingly real. Over Julian's shoulder, she saw Tyler watching them, his expression unreadable. But for once, Amara didn't care what Tyler thought. All that mattered was this moment, this feeling, this man who had shown up for her without hesitation. As the song ended, Julian didn't immediately let go. They stood there, swaying slightly, their faces close enough that Amara could count his eyelashes. Amara, he started, his voice low. Yeah. Nothing. Just wanted to say your name. They stayed at the dinner until late, talking and laughing with old friends. By the time they got back to the hotel, Amara was exhausted but happy. She changed into pajamas while Julian took the first shower, and when he emerged in sleep pants and a t-shirt, his hair damp, she felt that shift in her chest again. Today was good, Julian said, climbing into his side of the bed. Really good. Amara turned off the lights and settled under the covers. Everyone loves you, of course. I wasn't trying to make them love me. I was trying to make them see what I see. What do you see? Julian was quiet for so long that Amara thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, in the darkness, he said, I see someone extraordinary who doesn't realize how extraordinary she is. Someone who lights up every room she enters. Someone who deserves to be celebrated, not pitted. Amara's throat tightened. Jules. Go to sleep, Amara. Big day tomorrow. But Amara lay awake for a long time, listening to Julian breathe, feeling the warmth of his body on the other side of the bed. Everything about this felt right. Comfortable. Like they'd been doing this forever. And that scared her more than anything. Amara woke to the sound of music drifting through the open window. She stretched, reaching across the bed before remembering Julian wasn't there. His side was empty, the sheets cool. She found him again on the balcony. This time he was on his phone, speaking quietly. I understand, but you'll need to handle it without me. I trust your judgment. Yes, I'll review the contracts when I'm back, but for now you have full authority to proceed. He paused, listening. Sarah, I know it's unusual for me to be out of touch, but this is important. I'll be available for emergencies only. He ended the call and turned to find Amara watching from the doorway. Work? She asked. Just delegating. Nothing I can't handle. He smiled, but there was tension around his eyes. Ready for the festival? The Maplewood Spring Festival was a town tradition going back decades. Every year, the main street closed to traffic and filled with vendors, games, and food stalls. There were competitions for everything from pie baking to sack races, and everyone in town participated. Amara and Julian walked hand in hand down Main Street, taking in the organized chaos. Children ran past with balloons, the smell of funnel cakes and barbecue filled the air, and somewhere a band played bluegrass music. This is amazing, Julian said, looking around with genuine delight. My neighborhood in the city doesn't do anything like this. Wait until you see the couples competition, Amara said. It's ridiculous but fun. Couples competition? Various games and challenges. Winners get their names on a plaque in the town hall and free dinner at Rosie's Diner for a year. We should enter, Julian said immediately. Absolutely not. It's embarrassing. Tyler and I entered once and we came in last place. Then it's time to redeem yourself. Julian squeezed her hand. Come on. It'll be fun. Before Amara could protest, Julian was dragging her to the registration table. They signed up as Team Crawford, which made Amara laugh. Shouldn't we be Team Bennett? She asked. I like the sound of Team Crawford better. Has a nice ring to it. The competition consisted of 5 challenges spread throughout the afternoon. The first was a 3-legged race, where couples had to navigate an obstacle course with their legs tied together. Julian and Amara practiced for 5 minutes, stumbling and laughing before their heat began. Left, right, Julian chanted as they moved, and somehow they found a rhythm. They weren't the fastest, but they didn't fall, finishing third in their heat. The second challenge was a water balloon toss. Couples stood opposite each other, tossing a water balloon back and forth while taking a step back after each successful catch. The last couple with an intact balloon won. Amara had good aim from her softball days, and Julian had steady hands. They made it to the final 3 couples before their balloon burst, soaking Julian's blue shirt. You did that on purpose, he accused, laughing. Did not. You moved left when you should have stayed still. I definitely stayed still. You threw high. They were both laughing too hard to care who was right. The third challenge was a cooking competition. Each couple received a mystery basket of ingredients and 20 minutes to create a dish. Amara and Julian stared at their basket. Chicken breast, peaches, spinach, and rice. I've got this, Amara said, taking charge. She'd watched enough cooking shows to have ideas. They made a peach-glazed chicken with spinach rice, working together smoothly. Julian chopped while Amara cooked, and when the timer went off, their dish looked and smelled impressive. The judges, 3 local restaurant owners, tasted all the entries and declared Amara and Julian's dish the winner. They were now tied for first place overall. I didn't know you could cook like that, Julian said as they walked to the next challenge. There's a lot you don't know about me, Amara teased. Then I guess I'll have to keep paying attention. The fourth challenge was trivia about each other. Couples sat back to back and answered questions about their partner's preferences, memories, and habits. It was designed to show how well couples knew each other. Amara was nervous. She and Julian knew each other well, but these questions could be tricky. What's your partner's coffee order? The host asked. Amara and Julian both answered instantly and correctly, earning a point. Where did your partner grow up? Another point. What's your partner's biggest fear? Amara wrote, failure, without hesitation. Julian wrote, letting down people I love. When they compared answers, both were right. They answered every question correctly, earning a perfect score. The crowd applauded and someone called out, now that's a couple who really knows each other. The final challenge was a dance competition. Nothing formal, just couples dancing to 3 different songs of varying tempos. Judges would score on coordination, connection, and entertainment value. The first song was upbeat, something country and fun. Julian spun Amara out and back, both of them laughing. The second song was slower, and they moved together naturally, Julian's hand on her back, their steps perfectly synchronized. The third song was a wild card, a swing number that had most couples stumbling. But Julian surprised her. I took lessons in college, he admitted. My mother insisted. He led her through moves Amara barely knew, twirling and dipping her, and she followed instinctively, trusting him completely. When the music ended, the crowd erupted in applause. The judges deliberated for 5 minutes before announcing the winners. Julian and Amara. Team Crawford had won the entire competition. They received their trophy, a ridiculous plastic thing shaped like two interlocked hearts, and their names were indeed added to the plaque in the town hall. As they posed for photos, Amara caught Tyler watching from the crowd, his expression sour. "Best afternoon ever," Julian declared as they walked through the festival, trophy tucked under his arm. They stopped at various booths, buying handmade candles and local honey. Julian insisted on playing carnival games, winning Amara a stuffed bear at the ring toss. They ate corn dogs and shared a funnel cake, powdered sugar dusting their clothes. As the sun began to set, they found themselves at the Ferris wheel. The line was short, the operator an elderly man who smiled toothlessly at them. "Last ride of the night," he said. "Make it a good one." They climbed into the gondola, and as the wheel lifted them into the air, the entire town spread out below them. Lights twinkled in the growing darkness, music floated up from the street, and Amara felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. "This was perfect," she said softly. Julian turned to look at her. They were at the very top of the wheel, suspended in the twilight. "Amara, can I ask you something?" "Of course." He hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met differently? If we hadn't been friends first?" Amara's heart began to race. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we'd met at a party or through mutual friends who introduced us specifically because they thought we'd be good together? Do you think we would have dated? Or would we still have ended up as friends?" The question hung in the air between them. Amara thought about it, really thought about it. "I don't know," she admitted. "I think we would have been attracted to each other. But the friendship, that foundation we built, I think that's what makes us, us." "Yeah," Julian said quietly. "The foundation." The Ferris wheel descended, and the moment passed. But as they walked back to the hotel, Julian's hand in hers, Amara couldn't stop thinking about his question. About what might have been or what might still be possible. That night, after they'd showered and changed, they sat on the balcony under the stars. Julian had ordered wine from room service, and they sipped it slowly, talking about everything and nothing. "Thank you for today," Amara said. "For making it so fun. I know you probably had better things to do than enter a small-town couples competition. There was nothing better I could have been doing." Julian set down his wine glass. "Amara, I need you to understand something. This week, being here with you, it's not a sacrifice. It's not a favor I'm doing that I resent. I'm exactly where I want to be. But your work, your meetings, can wait. Will wait. You're more important." Amara felt tears threaten. "What? Why am I so important to you?" Julian looked at her for a long moment. "Do you really not know?" Before Amara could answer, her phone rang. It was her mother, asking if they could come to lunch tomorrow with some extended family who wanted to meet Julian. Amara said yes, and by the time she hung up, the moment with Julian had passed. They went to bed soon after, both exhausted from the day. But as Amara lay in the darkness, she kept replaying Julian's question. "Do you really not know?" What didn't she know? That Julian cared about her? She knew that. That he was a good friend? She'd always known that. But was he asking something else? Implying something else? Amara rolled onto her side, facing Julian's back. In sleep he looked peaceful, younger somehow. She wanted to reach out and touch him, to see if he'd wake up, to ask him to finish the conversation they'd started. But she didn't. Because she was afraid of the answer. Afraid of what it would mean if Julian felt something more than friendship. Afraid of ruining what they had by wanting more. So she closed her eyes and tried to sleep, even as her heart raced with questions that had no easy answers. The next morning brought unexpected rain, the kind of spring storm that rolls in fast and stays for hours. Amara woke to the sound of rain against the windows and Julian's voice speaking quietly on the phone in the bathroom. "I understand the concern, but I trust the team to handle it. If the investors are nervous, schedule a video call for next week when I'm back." Pause. "No, I'm not cutting this trip short. This is important. More important than the investors realize." Amara sat up as Julian emerged, his hair damp from the shower. He wore jeans and a red sweater that made his brown eyes seem even warmer. "Morning," he said. "Looks like the festival cleanup will be postponed today. Everything okay with work?" Amara asked. Julian sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that she could smell his soap. "Minor crisis with the new software launch. Nothing that can't wait. How'd you sleep?" "Good. You?" "Fine." But there were shadows under his eyes that suggested otherwise. They had brunch at a small cafe downtown, rain streaming down the windows. The place was packed with festival stragglers escaping the weather. They ordered omelets and coffee, settling into a corner booth. "So," Julian said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "6 sugars now as promised. What's the plan for the rest of the week?" "More family time," Amara said. "My mother wants you to meet everyone. Aunts, uncles, cousins. The full Bennett family experience. I'm looking forward to it." "You say that now. Wait until my Aunt Diane starts asking when we're getting married." Julian paused mid-sip. "Is that likely?" "Guaranteed. She asked me about marriage when I was dating Tyler after only 3 months. With you, the successful billionaire boyfriend, she'll probably start planning the wedding before dessert." "And what would you say?" Julian asked quietly. "If she asked?" Amara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'd say we're taking things slow. That we want to enjoy being together without pressure." "That's a good answer." Julian set down his cup. "Amara, can we talk about something?" "That sounds serious." "Not bad serious. Just honest." He took a breath. "This pretending, it's gotten complicated. For me at least." Amara's heart began to pound. "Complicated how?" "Because the lines are blurring. When we hold hands or dance or sleep in the same bed, it doesn't feel like pretending anymore. Feels real. And I'm not sure how to separate what's for show and what's actually happening between us." Amara stared at him, her mouth dry. "Jules? I'm not saying this to pressure you or to make things awkward. I just think we should be honest with each other about what we're feeling. We've always been honest, right? That's the foundation of our friendship." "Right," Amara managed. "Honest. So I'll go first." Julian leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I've loved you as a friend for 8 years. But lately, maybe especially this week, I've started to wonder if that's the only kind of love I feel for you. And I think you might be wondering the same thing." Amara couldn't breathe. Julian had just said the thing she'd been too afraid to even think clearly. He'd put words to the confusion and attraction and fear that had been building since they arrived in Maplewood. "I don't know what I'm feeling," Amara admitted. "Everything is mixed up. We're pretending for my family, but when you touch me or look at me a certain way, it doesn't feel like pretending. And that scares me because I can't lose you, Julian. I can't risk our friendship for something that might not work." "Who says it won't work?" Julian reached across the table and took her hand. "Amara, we already have the hard part. We know each other. We trust each other. We genuinely like spending time together. Isn't that a better foundation for a relationship than most couples start with? But what if we try and it fails? What if we date and realize we were better as friends? What if I lose you completely? Or what if we try and it's everything we never knew we needed?" Julian's thumb traced circles on her palm. "What if we're already halfway in love and just too scared to admit it?" Amara pulled her hand back, not because she wanted to but because she needed to think clearly, and Julian's touch made thinking impossible. "This is too much. Too fast. We came here to get through my hometown reunion, not to change our entire relationship. Maybe this week was about more than the reunion." Julian's voice was gentle but firm. "Maybe we needed this, the pretending, to see what's been there all along. I can't do this right now." Amara stood, grabbing her purse. "I need some air. It's pouring rain. I don't care." She walked out of the cafe, rain immediately soaking through her coat. She walked without direction, just needing space to process everything Julian had said. He loved her. Or was falling in love with her. Or had been in love with her and was finally admitting it. And she, what did she feel? The truth, the terrifying truth, was that she'd been in love with Julian Crawford for at least 2 years. Maybe longer. She'd just buried it so deep, hidden it so well that she'd convinced herself it wasn't real. Because Julian was her best friend, her safe person, the one relationship in her life that was uncomplicated and stable. Except it wasn't uncomplicated anymore. And it hadn't been stable since the moment he'd agreed to come to Maplewood with her. Amara found herself at the town park, standing under the gazebo for shelter. The rain created a curtain around her, isolating her in this small dry space. She sat on the bench, her coat dripping, and let herself cry. She cried for the confusion and the fear. She cried for the friendship that might be changing forever. And she cried because deep down, under all the fear, she wanted what Julian was offering. She wanted to stop pretending and make it real. "I thought I'd find you here." Amara looked up to find Julian standing at the gazebo entrance, soaked despite the umbrella he carried. "You followed me." "Of course I followed you. You ran out in a storm." He sat beside her, close but not touching. "Amara, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have put all that on you during a casual brunch." "It wasn't casual," Amara said, wiping her eyes. "Nothing about this week has been casual." "No," Julian agreed. "It hasn't. They sat in silence, listening to the rain. Finally, Amara spoke. I'm scared, Jules. I'm so scared of losing you. You won't lose me. I promise you that. Even if we try this and it doesn't work, even if we decide we're better as friends, you will never lose me. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. Because you're not just my best friend, Amara. You're my person. The one I call when something good happens. The one I want to share things with. The one whose opinion matters most. That doesn't change based on whether we're dating or not. Amara turned to look at him. Really look at him. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his red sweater dark with rain, but his eyes were clear and certain. What if I'm not ready? She asked quietly. Then we wait. We keep pretending for your reunion, we go back to the city, and we give you time to figure out what you want. No pressure. No ultimatums. Just honesty and patience. And if I'm never ready? If I decide the risk is too great? Julian's smile was sad but genuine. Then I'll accept that. I'll be disappointed, but I'll accept it. Your friendship is worth more to me than any potential romance. Amara felt something crack in her chest. Julian was giving her an out, a safe way to preserve their friendship. He was putting her comfort above his own feelings. And that, more than anything he'd said, told her what she needed to know. I'm not ready, she said slowly. But I might be. So, I just need time to process this, to figure out what I'm feeling without the pressure of performing for my family. Take all the time you need. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we stick to the plan. We're a couple for your reunion and your family. But we keep talking, keep being honest about what we're feeling. And when you're ready, however this goes, we'll face it together. Amara nodded, relief flooding through her. Okay. I can do that. They sat in the gazebo until the rain slowed to a drizzle. Julian draped his jacket around Amara's shoulders, and they walked back to the hotel slowly, not holding hands but walking close enough that their arms brushed with every step. Back in their room, they changed into dry clothes. The vulnerability of the morning left them both quiet, processing. Amara showered, letting the hot water warm her chilled skin, and when she emerged she found Julian on the balcony again, staring at the garden below. Jules? She called softly. He turned, and something in his expression made her cross to him. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. Thank you, she murmured. For being patient. For understanding. Julian's hands came up to cover hers, holding her close. Always. They stood like that for a long time, neither speaking, just being present with each other. And Amara realized that this quiet intimacy, was what she'd been afraid to lose. But maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to lose it. Maybe she could have this and more. Maybe Julian was right and they were already halfway in love. Maybe the scariest thing wasn't trying and failing. Maybe the scariest thing was never trying at all. The next 3 days passed in a blur of family gatherings, wedding preparations, and careful navigation of the new awareness between Amara and Julian. They continued their charade, holding hands and exchanging affectionate looks, but now every touch carried extra weight. Every smile meant more than it had before. Kenji's wedding was set for Saturday, and the entire Bennett family was mobilizing to make it perfect. On Thursday morning, Amara and Julian joined Amara's mother and aunts at the church to help with decorations. We need white roses here, Aunt Diane directed, pointing to the altar. And the tulle needs to be draped, not bunched. Bunched looks cheap. Julian climbed a ladder to hang garlands while Amara arranged flowers. He worked without complaint, taking direction from the Bennett women with good humor. At one point, Aunt Diane pulled Amara aside. That man is a keeper, she said, watching Julian help Amara's mother hang fairy lights. He's not just handsome and successful. He's kind. And patient. Do you know how rare that is? I know, Amara said softly. Then don't let him go. I've seen the way he looks at you, honey. That's real love. The kind that lasts. Amara's throat tightened. If only Aunt Diane knew the truth. That none of this was real. Or at least it hadn't started real. Now she wasn't sure what it was. That afternoon, Omar's parents arrived from Egypt. Dr. Hassan and his wife Layla were warm and welcoming, embracing Amara immediately and complimenting Julian on his manners and obvious devotion to Amara. A man who looks at a woman the way you look at Amara, Dr. Hassan said to Julian, that's a man who understands what matters. That evening, both families gathered at the Bennett home for a pre-wedding dinner. The house was packed with relatives, food covering every surface, conversation flowing in multiple languages as the two families merged. Julian fit seamlessly into the chaos, helping in the kitchen, playing with the children, and charming every relative he met. Amara watched him from across the room, talking animatedly with Omar about Egyptian architecture. He looked happy. Genuinely happy. And she realized he wasn't acting for her benefit. He actually enjoyed the big family gatherings and the noise and the warmth. After dinner, the women gathered in the living room while the men cleared dishes. It was a Bennett tradition, this separation of tasks, and normally Amara bristled at the gender roles. But tonight, she was grateful for the chance to talk with the women in her family. "Tell us everything," her cousin Monica demanded. "How did you land Julian Crawford?" "I didn't land him," Amara protested. "We're friends who became more." "But how? You've known him for years. What changed?" Amara thought about Julian's story from the first family dinner, about seeing her in the red dress and finally admitting his feelings. "I think we both stopped being afraid," she said honestly. "We stopped worrying about ruining the friendship and started wondering what might be possible." "That's beautiful," Kenji said, squeezing Amara's hand. "I'm so happy for you." The guilt twisted in Amara's stomach. She was lying to her family, letting them believe in this false relationship. But what was she supposed to say? "Actually, it's all pretend and I'm not sure how I really feel about him?" Later that night, back at the hotel, Julian sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out his phone. "My assistant sent over the speech I need to give at Kenji's reception. Want to hear it?" "You already wrote a speech?" "Had it written. I wanted your approval before the wedding." He read it aloud, a beautiful piece about love and partnership and the courage it takes to commit to another person. He talked about watching Amara with her family, seeing the values she'd been raised with, and how lucky Omar was to be joining such a caring family. When he finished, Amara had tears in her eyes. "It's perfect. Jules, that's absolutely perfect. You think Kenji will like it?" "She'll love it. Everyone will." Amara hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Did you mean it? What you said in the speech about courage and commitment?" Julian set down his phone, giving her his full attention. "Every word." "Amara, I know we're in this strange in-between place right now, but I meant what I said in the gazebo. However this develops between us, I'm committed to being in your life. That takes courage too, admitting you care about someone enough to risk everything." "What if I'm not brave enough?" Amara whispered. "You're the bravest person I know. You left this small town to build a career in the city. You took on projects at work that terrified you. You asked me to come here even though it meant being vulnerable. You're already brave, Amara. You just need to trust yourself." That night, as they lay in the darkness, Amara spoke into the quiet. "Jules? Are you awake?" "Yeah. I've been thinking about what you said. About us maybe being in love and not admitting it." She felt him shift, turning toward her. "And? I think you might be right. I think I've been in love with you for a while. I just couldn't let myself acknowledge it because I was so afraid of losing you." Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Can I hold you?" "Yes." He moved across the bed and Amara rolled into his arms. They fit together perfectly, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. It felt like coming home. "I love you," Julian said into her hair. "Not just as a friend. As everything. And I'm willing to wait as long as you need to catch up to where I am. But I needed you to know that. No more hiding." Amara pressed her face into his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. "I'm catching up," she promised. "Faster than you think." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and when Amara woke in the morning, Julian's arms were still around her. She didn't move, didn't want to break the peace of the moment. Instead, she lay there, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek, and let herself imagine what it would be like if this was real. If they woke up like this every morning. If she could turn her head and kiss him and know that he was hers and she was his. The thought didn't terrify her as much as it had a week ago. Instead, it felt right. Natural. Like a path she'd been walking toward without realizing it. Julian stirred, tightening his hold on her. "Morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning. Did you sleep okay?" "Better than I have in months." He pulled back just enough to look at her. "Amara, about last night?" "I meant it," she said quickly. "Everything I said. I do love you, Jules. I'm just still figuring out what that means." "That's enough," he said, smiling. "That's more than enough." The wedding was the next day and there was still so much to do. But for now, in this quiet morning moment, Amara let herself just be. Be held. Be loved. Be exactly where she needed to be. Friday brought a flurry of last-minute wedding preparations. The rehearsal was scheduled for 3 in the afternoon, with a dinner following at the same restaurant where Amara and Julian had met her parents on their first night in Maplewood. Amara spent the morning with Kenji, helping her sister finalize seating arrangements and pack for her honeymoon to Greece. They worked at Kenji's apartment, wedding dress hanging in the corner like a beautiful ghost. "Are you nervous?" Amara asked, checking names off the seating chart. "Terrified," Kenji admitted. "Not about marrying Omar. I'm sure about him. But about everything else. What if I trip walking down the aisle? What if I forget my vows? What if someone objects during the ceremony?" Amara laughed. "No one is going to object. And if you trip, Omar will catch you. That's literally what marriage is, catching each other when you fall." Kenji looked at her sister thoughtfully. "When did you get so wise about relationships?" "I'm not wise. I'm just observing." "Observing Julian, you mean?" Kenji smiled. "You two are really good together, you know. I've never seen you this happy." Amara felt the familiar guilt twist in her stomach. The lie had become so natural that sometimes she forgot they were pretending. "He makes it easy to be happy. That's how Omar makes me feel. Like everything is easier when he's around." Kenji paused in her packing. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course. I was worried about you. After Tyler you seemed so closed off. Like you'd decided love wasn't worth the risk. But now, seeing you with Julian, I can see you've opened up again. It gives me hope that you'll be okay no matter what happens in life." Amara's eyes burned with tears. If only Kenji knew the truth. If only Amara could tell her that this whole thing was fake, an elaborate pretense to save face at the reunion. But she couldn't. Not now, not with the wedding tomorrow. "I'll be okay," Amara said softly. "We'll both be okay." The wedding rehearsal at 3 o'clock was organized chaos. The wedding party consisted of Kenji's two best friends as bridesmaids, Omar's brother and cousin as groomsmen, and a flower girl who kept trying to eat the petals instead of scattering them. Julian sat in the front pew, watching as the coordinator directed everyone through their steps. When it was Amara's turn to walk down the aisle as maid of honor, she caught Julian's eye. He smiled at her, that warm smile that made her heart skip, and something inside her shifted. This was real. Not the boyfriend-girlfriend label, but the feeling underneath. The love that had been growing for years, nurtured by friendship and trust and all those small moments that added up to something extraordinary. After the rehearsal, everyone headed to the restaurant. Julian drove, one hand on the wheel and the other holding Amara's. "You okay?" he asked. "You've been quiet." "Just thinking." "About?" "About how much can change in a week. I came to Maplewood dreading the reunion, feeling like a failure. Now I feel like I've figured something important out." "What's that?" Amara squeezed his hand. "I'll tell you soon. I promise." The rehearsal dinner was lovely. The families mingled easily now, comfortable with each other. Toasts were made to the happy couple, stories were told, and laughter filled the private room the Bennetts had reserved. When it was time for Julian to give his speech as Amara's partner, he stood and cleared his throat. The room fell silent. "I've only known the Bennett and Hassan families for a week," Julian began, "but I feel like I've known you much longer because Amara has told me about you for years. She talks about her sister Kenji with so much love and pride. About her parents who taught her the value of hard work and kindness. About extended family who supported her dreams even when they didn't fully understand them." He paused, finding Amara's eyes. "Love takes many forms. There's the romantic love that brought Kenji and Omar together. But there's also the love of family, the love of friendship, the love that says, 'I choose you every day no matter what.' That's what I see in this family. That's what I've experienced this week. And I'm honored to be here celebrating two people who understand that love is not just a feeling, it's a choice. A daily commitment to show up for each other." The room erupted in applause. Kenji was crying happy tears and even Omar looked emotional. But Julian was still looking at Amara, and she understood what he was really saying. He was choosing her. Every day. No matter what. After dinner, as they drove back to the hotel, Amara couldn't stop thinking about Julian's words. The choosing, the commitment, the daily showing up. That's what he'd been doing for 8 years. Choosing her friendship. Showing up when she needed him. And now he was offering more. Not demanding it, not pressuring her, just offering. Waiting patiently for her to be ready. Back in their room, Amara stood on the balcony while Julian changed for bed. The night air was cool and smelled like honeysuckle. Tomorrow was Kenji's wedding. The day after that was the reunion. And then they'd go home, back to their regular lives and have to figure out what this week had meant. Julian joined her on the balcony, wearing sleep pants and a t-shirt. He stood beside her, not touching, giving her space. "Your speech was beautiful," Amara said. "I meant every word." "I know you did." She turned to face him. "Jules, I need to tell you something." "Okay." I'm ready. Or I'm almost ready. I'm scared still, but I think being scared is okay. What matters is that I don't want to go back to the city and pretend this week didn't happen. I don't want to fake break up and lose whatever this is between us. Julian's expression was cautious, hopeful. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to try. Really try. Not pretend dating but actual dating. You and me figuring this out together. Are you sure? No, Amara admitted with a shaky laugh. But I'm sure that I love you. That I want you in my life as more than a friend. That waking up in your arms the other morning felt right in a way nothing has felt right in a long time. Julian closed the distance between them, cupping her face in his hands. Amara Bennett, can I kiss you? Yes. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. But Amara didn't want to change her mind. She rose on her toes, meeting him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative. Testing. Then Julian's arms came around her waist, pulling her closer, and Amara melted into him. The kiss deepened, 8 years of friendship and tension and unspoken feelings pouring into this one moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Julian rested his forehead against hers. That was worth waiting for, he said. We've wasted so much time. We haven't wasted anything. We built a foundation. Now we're just adding another floor to the building. Amara laughed, the sound bright with joy. Did you just use an architecture metaphor? I'm a tech guy. It's the best I've got. They kissed again, slower this time, exploring. Learning each other in this new context. It felt familiar and new at the same time, comfortable and exciting. Eventually they went back inside, both reluctant to end the moment but knowing they had a big day ahead. They lay in bed facing each other, hands clasped between them. What do we tell people? Amara asked. About us. The truth. That we were friends who fell in love. We don't have to tell them we were pretending. We can just say things developed naturally during the trip. Which is actually true, Amara realized. We were pretending at first, but somewhere along the way it stopped being pretend. Exactly. Julian brushed a curl away from her face. No more hiding, Amara. From each other or from the world. No more hiding, she agreed. They fell asleep still holding hands, and when Amara woke in the night, Julian had pulled her close, her back to his chest, his arms secure around her waist. She smiled in the darkness and let herself relax into his warmth. This was real. They were real. And tomorrow at Kenji's wedding, they wouldn't have to pretend anymore. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, the storm from earlier in the week giving way to perfect spring weather. Amara woke early to Julian kissing her shoulder, a sweet gentle wake-up that made her smile before she even opened her eyes. Good morning, he murmured against her skin. Best morning, she corrected, rolling over to face him. They lay there for a few minutes, just looking at each other, neither quite believing this was real. Finally, Julian sighed and sat up. Much as I'd love to stay here all day, your sister is getting married and you need to be there early. Come with me, Amara said impulsively. To the bridal suite. I know it's supposed to be just bridesmaids, but I want you there. Are you sure? I'm sure. No more separating you from important moments. So Julian came to the church with Amara at 9 in the morning, carrying her bridesmaid dress and a bag full of emergency supplies Amara's mother had assembled. The bridal suite was already chaos when they arrived, makeup artists setting up, the photographer capturing getting ready shots, and Kenji in the center of it all looking radiant and terrified. Jules? Kenji called out when she saw him. Thank goodness. We need someone tall to hang these decorations. Julian was immediately put to work, and he handled it with good humor, following directions from 5 different women simultaneously. Amara watched him help, thinking how easily he'd integrated into her family, how natural it felt to have him there. By 11 o'clock, Kenji was in her dress, a simple elegant gown with lace sleeves and a flowing train. She looked stunning, and when Amara's mother saw her, she burst into tears. My baby girl, she sobbed. All grown up. Mama, you're going to make me cry, and my makeup is finally perfect, Kenji protested, but she was tearing up too. The wedding started at noon. Julian found his seat in the 3rd row, between Amara's Aunt Diane and Omar's cousin. The church filled with guests, all dressed in their finest, the air scented with roses and anticipation. The music started and the wedding party began processing down the aisle. Amara walked slowly, one hand gripping her bouquet of red roses, her eyes finding Julian's in the crowd. He smiled at her and she smiled back, feeling lighter than air. Then came Kenji, walking down the aisle on their father's arm. She looked like a dream, backlit by sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows. Omar, waiting at the altar, had tears streaming down his face. The ceremony was beautiful. The pastor spoke about commitment and love, about building a life together through joy and challenge. Kenji and Omar exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising to be partners and best friends, to choose each other every single day. Amara's eyes kept drifting to Julian. He was watching the ceremony with genuine emotion, and when Kenji and Omar kissed, sealing their vows, Julian looked directly at Amara. The message in his eyes was clear. Someday that could be us. The thought didn't scare her anymore. Instead, it filled her with warmth and possibility. The reception was held at the Magnolia Inn, in the gardens that were now fully blooming with spring flowers. Tables were set up under white tents, string lights crisscrossing overhead, and a small dance floor had been installed near the fountain. The weather was perfect, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of honeysuckle. Julian found Amara as soon as the receiving line finished, offering his arm. "You look beautiful," he said, studying her in her bridesmaid dress. The emerald green matched her eyes. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Julian wore a navy suit with a burgundy tie that made his brown eyes pop. They found their seats at the head table. Julian placed strategically next to Amara even though technically partners weren't supposed to sit at the bridal party table. But Kenji had insisted, and no one argued with the bride on her wedding day. Dinner was served, a delicious meal of chicken and fish with all the southern sides Amara had grown up eating. Speeches followed dinner, the best man telling embarrassing stories about Omar, the maid of honor talking about watching Kenji fall in love. Then it was Julian's turn. He stood, looking comfortable and confident, and the crowd quieted. "I gave a speech last night about love and choice and commitment," Julian began. "But today, watching Kenji and Omar exchange vows, I realized I left something out. I forgot to mention the courage it takes to let yourself be loved." He paused, his eyes finding Amara's. "We spend so much time thinking about whether we love someone enough, whether we're capable of the commitment, whether we can be what another person needs. But we don't always ask if we're brave enough to accept love when it's offered, to believe we deserve it, to trust that someone sees all our flaws and chooses us anyway." Amara's breath caught. Julian was speaking to the room, but he was speaking to her. Kenji and Omar understand this. They're not just promising to love each other. They're promising to accept love, to believe they're worthy of it. And that's the real magic of today. Watching two people say yes not just to marriage but to being loved completely. The room erupted in applause. Julian sat down, and Amara reached under the table to squeeze his hand. "That was for me," she whispered. "That was for us." After the speeches, the dancing began. The first dance belonged to Kenji and Omar, swaying together while everyone watched. Then the father-daughter dance and the mother-son dance, and finally the floor opened to everyone. Julian pulled Amara onto the dance floor, one hand on her waist, the other clasped with hers. They moved together easily, naturally, like they'd been dancing together for years. "I love you," Amara said, the words coming easily now. "In case I haven't said it enough today. You can say it as many times as you want. I'll never get tired of hearing it. I love you. I love you. I love you." Julian laughed, spinning her out and back. "I love you too. More than I knew it was possible to love someone." They danced through multiple songs, only taking breaks when others cut in to dance with them. Tyler was there with his fiancée, but Amara barely noticed him. Let him see her happy. Let him see what real love looked like. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the photographer gathered the wedding party for photos. Amara stood with her sister, watching the photographer position people. "You're next," Kenji whispered, gesturing to Julian who was chatting with Omar across the garden. "Maybe," Amara said, but she was smiling. "Definitely. That man looks at you like you hung the moon." After photos, after the cake cutting and the bouquet toss, which Amara deliberately dodged, after the sparkler send-off as Kenji and Omar left for their honeymoon, the guests began trickling away. Julian and Amara stayed until the end, helping pack up decorations and leftover food. By the time they got back to their room it was past midnight and both were exhausted. "Best wedding I've ever been to," Julian said, collapsing onto the bed. "Best day," Amara agreed, lying down beside him. They didn't bother changing, just kicked off their shoes and lay together in their fancy clothes talking about the day. About Kenji's happiness, about the beautiful ceremony, about all the small perfect moments. "Tomorrow's the reunion," Julian said eventually. "I know." Amara rolled onto her side, facing him. "I'm not nervous anymore though. I know what matters now. It's not about proving anything to my old classmates or making Tyler jealous. It's about being happy. being loved. And I am. Because of you. Julian pulled her close, kissing her forehead. We should probably sleep. Tomorrow's a big day. Not as big as today. Today was perfect. Tomorrow will be too, Julian promised. Because we'll be together. They fell asleep in their wedding clothes, wrapped around each other, and Amara dreamed of white dresses and promises and a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. Amara woke to sunlight and the feeling of Julian's arms around her waist. They'd fallen asleep in their wedding clothes, and now those clothes were wrinkled beyond repair. She didn't care. Everything felt right in a way it hadn't before. Julian stirred, pressing a kiss to her neck. Morning. Morning. Amara rolled over to face him. We fell asleep in our fancy clothes. Worth it. I wasn't letting go of you for anything. He studied her face, brushing curls away from her forehead. Big day today. The reunion. You ready? With you? I'm ready for anything. They showered and dressed, Amara choosing a red dress that hugged her curves, Julian in dark jeans and a blue shirt. Looking at them in the mirror, Amara thought they looked good together. Like they belonged. The reunion was being held at the high school gymnasium, transformed with decorations and a photo booth and tables full of yearbooks and memorabilia. They arrived at 2 o'clock to a crowd already gathering, people greeting old friends and comparing notes on the past 10 years. Amara. Brittany Rodriguez rushed over, pulling her into a hug. I'm so glad you came. And Julian, wonderful to see you again. They were immediately swept into conversations, catching up with people Amara hadn't seen since graduation. Julian stayed at her side, attentive but not overbearing, letting her have her reunions while making it clear he was there if she needed him. Tyler and his fiancée arrived around 3. Amara saw them enter but felt nothing. No anger, no jealousy, just indifference. Tyler had been important once, but he wasn't anymore. He was just a guy she used to date, someone who hadn't appreciated what he had. Want to get some air? Julian asked after an hour of socializing. They stepped outside to the football field where Amara had spent Friday nights in high school, cheering at games. The field was empty now, quiet, the bleachers casting long shadows in the afternoon sun. How are you doing? Julian asked, taking her hand. Good. Really good, actually. Amara leaned against him. This morning I realized something. I spent so much energy being afraid that people were judging me for being single, for not having my life figured out. But most people here are just trying to figure out their own lives. They're not thinking about my relationship status. And even if they were, Julian added, it wouldn't matter. Because you're not defined by who you're dating. You're successful and brilliant all on your own. I know that now. But it helps having you here to remind me. They walked around the track talking about the reunion, about the people they'd met. Julian asked thoughtful questions about Amara's high school experience, and she found herself telling stories she'd forgotten, remembering good times instead of dwelling on the awkward years. When they returned to the gymnasium, the reunion was in full swing. Music played, people danced, and a slideshow of old photos ran on a projector screen. Amara found herself laughing at pictures of her teenage self, complete with questionable fashion choices and terrible haircuts. You were adorable, Julian said, studying a photo of 16-year-old Amara with braces and bangs. I was a disaster. An adorable disaster. He pulled her onto the dance floor as a slow song started. Come here. They swayed together, Amara's head on Julian's chest. Around them, other couples danced, but Amara only saw Julian. Only felt his arms around her, his heartbeat against her cheek. Thank you, she murmured. For what? For coming. For pretending. For making it real. Julian pulled back enough to look at her. It was always real, Amara. The love was always there. We just finally acknowledged it. Best acknowledgement of my life. Mine too. The song ended, but they kept swaying, not ready to let go. Finally, the DJ announced the last song of the night, a cheesy pop number that had everyone rushing to the dance floor. Amara and Julian danced with the group, laughing and singing along to lyrics they'd memorized in high school. It was silly and fun and perfect. This was what the reunion should have been all along, a celebration, not a comparison. As the party wound down, people exchanged contact information and promised to stay in touch. Tyler approached as Amara was saying goodbye to Brittany. Hey, he said awkwardly. Can we talk for a minute? Julian stepped back, giving them space but staying close enough to intervene if needed. Amara appreciated that, the balance of trust and protectiveness. What's up? Amara asked neutrally. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For how things ended between us. I didn't handle it well. No, you didn't, Amara agreed. But it's okay. We weren't right for each other. I can see that now. You and Julian, you fit. I never made you look as happy as you do with him. Tyler paused. I hope we can be friends. Or at least friendly. I'd like that, Amara said honestly. No hard feelings, Tyler. They shook hands, a formal ending to a relationship that had never been quite right. Tyler rejoined his fiancée, and Julian returned to Amara's side. Closure? He asked. Something like that. Amara took his hand. Ready to go home? They said their goodbyes and drove back to the hotel for the last time. Tomorrow morning they'd fly back to the city, back to their regular lives. But everything was different now. They were different. In their room they packed slowly, neither wanting the trip to end. Finally, everything was ready for the morning departure. Amara, Julian said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Come here. She sat beside him and he took both her hands in his. This week has been the best week of my life, he said seriously. Not because of the pretending or the reunion, but because we finally figured out what we should have known all along. That we're better together than apart. I feel the same way. When we get back to the city, I want to do this right. Real dates. Meeting each other's friends as a couple, not just as friends who happen to be there. Building a relationship on top of the friendship we already have. I want that too. Good. Julian smiled. Because I'm in this for the long haul, Amara Bennett. I'm choosing you every day for the rest of my life if you'll have me. Jules, are you? I'm not proposing. Not yet. But I'm telling you my intentions. I'm telling you that this isn't a temporary thing for me. You're my person. Amara felt tears slide down her cheeks. You're my person too. You always have been. They kissed, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Julian wiped her tears gently. No more crying. This is a happy moment. These are happy tears. They got ready for bed, falling into the routine they developed over the past week. Brushing teeth side by side, changing in the same room without awkwardness, climbing into bed together like they'd been doing it for years. Amara settled into Julian's arms, her favorite position now. She felt safe here, loved exactly where she was meant to be. Jules? She whispered into the darkness. Yeah. I'm glad I called you that night. After Kenji's engagement party. I'm glad I asked you to come here. So am I. Best phone call I've ever received. They fell asleep tangled together, and when morning came they woke the same way. No awkwardness, no regrets. Just rightness. The flight home was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. As the plane descended into the city, Amara looked out at the skyline and felt a surge of excitement. This was their city. Their home. And now they'd build a life here together. Julian drove her to her apartment, helping carry her luggage upstairs. At her door he paused. Dinner tomorrow night? He asked. A real date, just us? I'd love that. I'll pick you up at 7. He kissed her long and slow. I love you, Amara. I love you too. Amara watched him walk to the elevator, already missing him even though she'd just seen him. As soon as he disappeared from sight, her phone buzzed. Julian, already counting down until tomorrow. Thank you for the best week of my life. Amara, it was all pretend until it wasn't. Now it's everything. Julian, now it's everything. See you tomorrow, love. Amara entered her apartment, looking around at her familiar space with new eyes. This was her life, her career, her apartment, her independence. And now she had Julian too, not as a replacement for those things but as an addition to them. Someone to share the good days and help through the bad ones. She unpacked slowly, putting away clothes and toiletries, thinking about the week. She'd gone to Maplewood dreading the reunion, terrified of judgment, convinced she was a failure for being single. She'd come back knowing her worth, understanding that love wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about finding someone who saw you completely and chose you anyway. That night, Amara video called Kenji, who was in Greece on her honeymoon. Tell me everything, Kenji demanded. How was the reunion? Perfect. But that's not the important part. What's the important part? Julian and I are together. Really together. Not pretend anymore. Kenji squealed so loud that Omar appeared on screen, groggy and confused. What's happening? Amara and Julian are together, Kenji explained, bouncing excitedly. Finally, Omar said, then disappeared back to bed. Finally? Amara repeated. Girl, everyone could see you two were in love except you. I'm just glad you figured it out. Kenji's face softened. I'm really happy for you. Julian's good for you. He brings out the best parts. He does, Amara agreed. How's the honeymoon? Incredible. Greece is beautiful. But I can't wait to hear all about your date tomorrow. Call me after? They talked for another hour, Kenji sharing stories about Santorini and Amara recounting the reunion. By the time they hung up, Amara was exhausted but happy. She fell asleep in her own bed, alone for the first time in a week. But she didn't feel lonely. She felt loved. Because Julian was across the city, probably thinking about her the same way she was thinking about him. The next morning, Amara went to work, catching up on emails and projects. Her colleagues noticed something different about her, a lightness that hadn't been there before. Good vacation? Her boss asked. The best, Amara confirmed. At 7 that evening, Julian picked her up for their date. He wore dark jeans and a green shirt that made his eyes look even warmer. She'd chosen a maroon dress, wanting to look perfect for their first real date. You're beautiful, Julian said, offering his arm. You're biased. I'm honest. He took her to a small Italian restaurant, intimate and romantic with candles on every table. They ordered wine and pasta, talking easily about everything and nothing. It felt just like their normal dinners, except now Julian could reach across the table and hold her hand without pretense. Now he could look at her with all his feelings showing and she could look back the same way. After dinner they walked through the city hand in hand. The streets were busy with evening crowds, but Amara only saw Julian. Only felt his presence beside her, solid and real and permanent. I've been thinking, Julian said as they walked, about what comes next. For us. And? I don't want to rush things. We have time to figure this out. But I also don't want to waste time being cautious when I know what I want. What do you want? Julian stopped walking, turning to face her. The city moved around them, traffic and people and noise, but in that moment it was just the two of them. I want mornings waking up beside you. I want to build my life around yours, not because I'm giving up anything but because adding you makes everything better. I want dinner conversations and lazy Sundays and to be the person you call when something good or bad happens. I want all of it, Amara. The boring parts and the exciting parts and everything in between. Amara's heart felt too big for her chest. That's exactly what I want too. Then let's do it. Let's build this life together. Slowly, carefully, but together. Together, Amara agreed. They kissed on the city street, oblivious to the people walking around them. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Come home with me, Julian said. Not for anything except to spend more time together. I don't want this night to end yet. They went to Julian's penthouse, all glass and modern furniture with a view of the entire city. Amara had been here countless times, but tonight it felt different. Tonight she was here as his girlfriend, his partner, his person. They sat on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights. Julian held her close and Amara thought about how far they'd come. From college friends to best friends to this. A love that felt inevitable and right. Do you ever think about the future? Amara asked. Like years from now? All the time. And in every version you're there. Good. Because in all my versions you're there too. They stayed on the balcony until late, talking and planning and dreaming. When Amara finally went home, past midnight, she felt like the luckiest person alive. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a relationship that felt both new and familiar. They had real dates now, fancy restaurants and museum trips and weekend getaways. But they also kept their friendship rituals. Sunday morning coffee, weeknight dinners at their favorite places, spontaneous adventures when work allowed. Julian met Amara's work friends officially as her boyfriend. They loved him, of course everyone loved Julian. And Amara met more of Julian's family and business associates, no longer as the friend he brought to events but as the woman he was building a life with. 3 months after they returned from Maplewood, Julian called Amara on a random Tuesday afternoon. Pack a bag, he said without preamble. What? Why? Because we're going somewhere. I'll pick you up in 2 hours. Julian, I have work. I already cleared it with your boss. 2 hours. Pack for warm weather. He hung up before she could protest. Amara stared at her phone then started laughing. This was Julian, spontaneous and generous and always finding ways to surprise her. She packed quickly, throwing summer clothes into a bag. 2 hours later, Julian appeared at her door, grinning like a kid with a secret. Where are we going? Amara demanded. You'll see. They drove to a private airfield where a plane waited. A much smaller plane than the one they'd taken to Maplewood, more intimate. Julian Crawford, what are you up to? Patience. You'll find out soon enough. They flew for 3 hours, Amara alternating between excitement and exasperation at Julian's refusal to explain. Finally they landed on a small island, somewhere tropical with white sand beaches and crystal clear water. Where are we? Amara asked as they climbed out of the plane. My family's private island. Well, technically my mother's, but she lets me use it. I thought we could use a few days away from the city. Just us. The house was gorgeous, open air and modern with views of the ocean from every room. Julian showed Amara around, ending in the master bedroom where their bags had already been delivered. This is incredible, Amara breathed, looking out at the water. It's our place now. I told my mother about you, about us. She said we can come here whenever we want. Build our own memories here. Amara turned to look at him. You told your mother about us? Of course. She's thrilled. She's been hoping we'd get together for years. Julian came to stand beside her. Amara, I love you. I want my family to know you, to love you. I want to integrate our lives completely. I want that too. They spent 3 perfect days on the island. Swimming in the ocean, eating meals on the beach, talking for hours about everything. Julian showed Amara his favorite spots from childhood vacations, sharing pieces of his life she'd never seen. On their last night, they sat on the beach watching the sunset. Julian had been quiet all day, and Amara could tell something was on his mind. What are you thinking about? She asked, leaning against his shoulder. About how much has changed in 6 months. How different everything is now. Good different. The best different. Julian shifted, turning to face her. Amara, I know it's only been a few months since we got together, but we've known each other for 8 years. I've loved you in some form for almost that entire time. And I know, without any doubt, that I want to spend my life with you. Amara's heart began to race. Jules? I'm not proposing. Not officially. But I'm telling you that I'm going to. When the time is right, when we're both ready, I'm going to ask you to marry me. And I wanted you to know that. To have time to think about it. To make sure this is really what you want. It is what I want, Amara said without hesitation. You're what I want. Not someday, not eventually. No. Always. Julian kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. Then we'll know. When the time is right, we'll both know. They flew home the next day, back to their regular lives. But everything was different now. They had a future planned, a life to build together. It wasn't pretend anymore. It had never been more real. 6 months later, on a random Tuesday that felt like every other Tuesday, Julian took Amara to the park where they'd met 8 years ago. The same bench where they'd sat and talked about a philosophy paper she was writing, and he was too stressed about his computer science project. Remember this spot? Julian asked as they sat down. This is where it all started, Amara said, looking around. The park looked the same. Trees budding with new spring growth, students walking past with backpacks, the whole world moving around them. This is where I fell in love with you, Julian said quietly. That very first day. You were so smart and funny, and you called me out on my terrible coffee order. And I thought, I want to know this person. I want to be around this person as much as possible. Jules, why are we here? He slid off the bench, kneeling on the ground in front of her. Amara's breath caught. Because this is where our story started. And I want this to be where our next chapter begins. He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple diamond on a silver band. Amara Bennett, you are my best friend, my partner, my person. You're the one I want to wake up beside every morning and fall asleep next to every night. You're who I want to build a life with, raise a family with, grow old with. Will you marry me? Amara was crying, happy tears streaming down her face. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms. They kissed while students walked past, oblivious to the moment happening on that bench. When they pulled apart, both were laughing through tears. I love you, Amara said. I'm so glad I called you that night. I'm so glad you said yes to my crazy request. It was the best request I've ever received. Because it gave us the excuse to finally be honest about what we'd been feeling all along. They sat on the bench for hours, planning and dreaming and talking about their future. A wedding, eventually. Maybe kids someday. Building careers they loved while supporting each other. Growing together instead of apart. As the sun began to set, Julian stood and offered his hand. Ready to go home? Amara took his hand, her engagement ring catching the light. Ready. As long as home means wherever you are. Home will always mean wherever we are together. They walked out of the park hand in hand, toward their car and their future and all the beautiful, messy, perfect moments that waited for them. It had started as pretend, a favor between friends. But it had become the most real thing in either of their lives. Love, Amara thought, always finds a way. Even when you're not looking for it. Even when you're too afraid to hope for it. Love shows up and says, here I am. I've been here all along. You just needed to be brave enough to see me. And she had been brave. They both had. Brave enough to risk friendship for something more. Brave enough to choose each other, every single day. As they drove toward their future, Amara looked at Julian and smiled. This was just the beginning. The real beginning of everything they'd always been meant to